So a big win for the Second Amendment is the Supreme Court overturns the New York Conceal law and really affects most of these may issue states as opposed to the shall issue states when it comes to concealed carry permits. So it looks like there's a lot more freedom for gun owners in the United States. So why exactly is it that I'm still concerned? Jack and I are about to get into it.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
I don't want you to write. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Has the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
What's up, Jack? How are we doing today, sir?
I'm doing dandy, George. How are you?
I'm doing well, but I could be doing better. We're not streaming to Facebook right now. So
Okay.
whatever happened, the link has broken again. It's likely we're going to have to get rid of our software altogether. And that's just going to have to be what it is. It's also not giving me any idea as to how many people are actually on the stream. So I'm working off of some assumptions. So it just says live recording and that's it. It's supposed to be telling me a number. So
I mean, look, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's do this, and then I'll look at cutting it tomorrow and putting it out in a short and getting the word out that way too.
Yeah, we could do that as well. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I can post this to Facebook as well. I just want to give that heads up because I know we got people watching on the other networks, so I'm going to stay there. I have to look it up manually, but I do see that there are people on. So welcome, everybody. We do have some celebratory information today, right? Huge decision from the Supreme Court. They've come through and shot down the law, the law in New York regarding concealed carry. So for those that are not familiar with what that law was, and I'll get into a little bit of the opinion that they wrote. I read a good portion of the majority opinion. Clarence Thomas is the one who put that out, and what basically Supreme Court had said, and what the law, I should start with the law. What the law was basically saying is that you can, if you want to get a concealed carry permit and exercise your Second Amendment rights, you're going to have to prove to us that there's some sort of danger or threat, specific threat, that you're running from. That you have to show, you have to, and you can't say I just want it for self protection. Like that, self defense is considered an illegitimate. People are getting refused for saying that they need it for self defense, and and this was, by the way, upheld in the local doo courts in New York with their lefty living Constitution judges, and but then the Supreme Court got a hold of it and just shot it right down. So we should be celebrating right now. Now, and I mentioned in the intro that I'm not really celebrating right now. And the reason that I'm not really celebrating right now is because really what the way that I see this, okay, and really in the end, I think when we do call this convention and we do start addressing things, one of the things that needs to get addressed is the Supreme Court in general. And you would say, George, why would you say that? Because they just ruled, to defend the Constitution and upheld our Second Amendment rights. Well, the reason I say that is because there are three judges on partisan lines who fall into the Ginsburg, it's a living document, courts get to rewrite the Constitution camp. And all three voted to usurp our Second Amendment rights. And I don't really care where you stand on gun laws and stuff like that. That's threatening. Okay, the reality of the matter is, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, all right, then our Second Amendment is done. Like the Bill of Rights, the courts are making it clear that there are justices throughout the country who are perfectly okay not interpreting but rewriting the Constitution. And that is very scary, because at some point in time these people are gonna, like, they're gonna have a president and they're gonna have vacancies, and what's gonna happen, right? Then what amendment, which right will they decide is no longer relevant due to the times and just take away, right? And that's what scares me. I'll get into the opinions and such in just a bit, but like I wanted to kind of just get that off my chest first, because it does scare me. It scares me. It scares me to death that we're one court away, from, and this was Trump's. This was the biggest thing about Trump winning, without a doubt. There's nothing close. There's nothing, not outing the media, not outing anything. The biggest thing about Trump winning was the Supreme Court justices. Period. Period. And we now know why. Because these people, like, to have three justices on the court who are perfectly okay letting local legislatures throw away the Constitution or rewrite it to be interpreted the way they see fit, as opposed to how it's written, is concerning. No?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So,
Yeah.
and I hadn't even thought about it that way, but I want to hear more about the way you're looking at it.
Well, it's just, look, the good thing about the opinions that were written, like if stare decisis means anything to courts going forward, and for those that don't know what stare decisis, it's just a fancy way of saying courts go based off precedent. Okay, now if I with these living document people, so and in case there is anybody who doesn't understand what I mean by living document, so there are judges out there. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of them. Okay, who believe that the Constitution is a living document that should change with the times, and it should be interpreted in context with the current day that we're in, and and essentially what that is saying is that it's okay for a Supreme Court justice who thinks that we're living in a time where everyone agrees with their personal political views, and that changes can be made or interpretations can be made to fundamentally transform the Bill of Rights, then it's okay. Then you can make those decisions. She and Scalia actually would argue about this. This would be one of their big back and forths. Like Scalia was absolutely the opposite, as are Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I don't know what to make out of Kavanaugh, but like, and I know Roberts is just politics. Like Roberts, just don't make the court look political. Like we'll assume the Constitution as long as no one calls us a political body. Like he could just go away. That guy. But Scalia and the rest of them, Clarence Thomas, etc. They are all constructionists. They are all, what is it? Barrett is the other one. I keep forgetting Amy Barrett. So she's the other one, and like they're all constructionists, and they're all, with the exception of Clarence Thomas, fairly young in the sense. I mean, Alito's getting up there, but Thomas is probably the oldest. He's probably the next to go. But like but if let's just say this though, we passed cause and now we put term limits on justices, and we don't address the fact that presidents are appointing them. Then what? Right? Like that's a major friggin' concern. That's a major concern. It won't take them 8 years to completely rewrite the Bill of Rights. Like people are worried about a runaway convention. This is the whole point of the convention, is to undo the damage that bad court decisions have done over the course of the last century. And now, like this is something that really needs to be taken serious when we get into this convention. Like this needs to be taken very seriously. How are we going to handle this as far as the states, having a say in justices? I mean, it needs to be done anyway, so they're not stacking the courts and doing all this stuff that they're threatening to do to us. But in the end, how do we address that situation? Because it's very real and it's a very real threat. If these justices are the only thing standing between us and a complete loss of the Second Amendment, and not the NRA or anyone else is going to overturn the Supreme Court. The only thing that's going to overturn the Supreme Court is another convention and another, like to clarify the amendment. I mean, stare decisis is pretty. What they did in this opinion adds to the precedent. I mean, they once again clarified, what exactly the Second Amendment is saying and what the courts have long since said that it is saying. But that just goes back to the point that the courts have long since interpreted it the correct way, and there are still 3 justices who are ready to throw it out. So it's like we're not talking one case. It's not like the abortion thing where there was one case that this is 200 years of precedent, and it's clear precedent, right? Because the founders wrote in very clear terms, and they didn't write in riddles and friggin' there were no 1,600-page documents. People were doing them by hand, right? So they weren't sitting there writing. They wrote the bills. They wrote the Bill of Rights. They wrote it quick. They wrote it well thought out, but they wrote it short, curt, and to the point. And so I'll get into one opinion that came up that kind of made that case. Give me a sec here. Let me just go through this because some of them can get here. So Justice Thomas, in the majority opinion, says to show why Heller does not support applying means end scrutiny. Heller is the major previous case, the last major decision on the Second Amendment, and they often go to it when doing stare decisis. So when he says it doesn't support applying means end scrutiny, meaning you can't, the ends don't justify the means. So the dissenting opinion here from the 3 Duterus who were okay usurping the Second Amendment was that, well, the state the state's allowed to do it because of the means, because they have an obligation to protect citizenry, and therefore, they can go ahead and do this, which is just crazy. No, they cannot, and their obligation to protect citizenry is actually being usurped here as well, because they're disarming their citizenry.
Well,
So
so where does it say they have an obligation to protect their citizens to begin with?
right, no,
It,
but the
it
courts
sounds
have
more like an
long held
opinion.
But the courts have long held that, in the sense of, this is why we have police, this is why we have, like that, there's an obligation from government to keep the peace, to keep rights from being infringed. I'm as free to throw my fist as far as your nose, right? So the courts have always had that kind of attitude towards states. All right. The difference here is that this is not a police matter. This is a this is a Bill of Rights matter. And
Right.
they actually, here, let me finish this, so that because there's a little bit to this. So he says, we began with textual analysis focused on the normal, quote unquote, normal and ordinary meaning of the Second Amendment's language. That analysis suggested that the amendment's operative clause, that quote, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed, guarantees, all right, the individual to possess and carry weapons in case of confrontation. Now, just making this a little bigger because I'm old. So he's saying right there that the reason it guarantees, like he's saying, the interpretation has always been that it guarantees that the people can carry weapons in case of confrontation, which is a clear reference to self-defense. Like that's the core purpose of what he's saying this means. And then, let me see where I was at. So, said, from there we assessed whether our initial conclusion was, quote, confirmed by historical background of the Second Amendment, end quote. He says, we looked to history because it's always been widely understood that the Second Amendment codified a pre-existing right. So that's strong language, right? What he's saying there is that the Second Amendment codifies a pre-existing right. So it's not like a right that people are. Abortion is the perfect example. So abortion was a right that people call a right because the Supreme Court created that, not because it was pre-existing. And whereas he's basically saying the right to bear arms predates the Constitution, it's a natural law. And that's what he's trying to get across. He says the amendment was not intended to lay down a novel principle, but rather codified a right inherited from our English ancestors. And he goes on to say they looked into English history coming into the colonial times, as well as the views of the colonists. He says, and we found no doubt, on the basis of both text and history, that the Second Amendment conferred an individual right to keep and bear arms. Now, if a court is going to take stare decisis seriously, and look, sometimes you have to have precedent, right? Like, you can't just have every court usurping. It's going to be a banana republic. So there's a reason for stare decisis to exist, but there's also, the attitude that, what, sometimes a decision was bad and needs to be overturned. And that was their case with Roe v. Wade, was that this original case was not judged on constitutional grounds, and they overturned it. So stare decisis, while people follow it, and judges are wary of it, they're not bound by it. If they really feel like there's a constitutional violation going on that needs to be corrected, they're still free to make their own decisions. But here they're basically setting the precedent here for that future court of Deuterus, who because it's going to come up again, right? They've been attacking the Second Amendment forever. They're about to hear a case that started in San Diego about the magazines, about the 10-round magazines. So a San Diego judge shot that down back in, like, early 2021, shot that down, and then that decision got backed by a a 3-person or 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit. But then when it got up to the full Ninth Circuit, we all know what the Ninth Circuit does, right? So it got up to the full Ninth Circuit and they reversed the other 2 judges. So now that is on its way to the Supreme Court as well. And I'm fairly confident that it's not long before this whole you can't have more than 10 rounds in your firearm is history. So that's coming next. But like in the end, like I'm just looking at this where, you know, when I read this opinion, it sounds to me like they're trying to be very clear about the stance on the Second Amendment. I mean, there's one point where they even mention I'm trying to scan this quickly, where they even mention like kill the militia argument basically. So they're basically saying, you know, they get into it and make the case that like it's not about, and you know how everyone argues from reading it, oh, this is for a militia, but you know, someone living in their house or just walking the streets is not in a militia. That's what they shot that down too. Like it was almost like a preemptive strike. If I mean they went off in this opinion, and I think they did it to kind of put things to bed for a while, you know, like just basically sending the message out, like, don't bring this stuff to us anymore because you know where we stand now, clearly without, you know, without wavering on this issue. And I maybe I didn't take that quote. I swore I did, but there was one where they specifically like spoke about that and said it's not just about, you know, it doesn't matter if someone's in a militia or not. Uh, Yeah, I don't have it. I wish I did. I don't have it. So, but anyway, you know, that the whole opinion read that way, and the thing is, when you and the majority opinion is, of course, is 100% right. It's look, whether you like guns or don't like guns. If you don't like guns and you think they should be illegal and the right to bear arms should be infringed, then you need to go and try and start your own movement for a convention and get your own resolution signed on that topic. And let me know how that works out for you, right? Like let me know how that works out because there are at least I could whip off 25, 30 states just off the top of my head where that would, you know, never allow anything like that to happen in a ratification process, even in a calling process, just to write the resolutions. Like it just will never happen. So but anyway, that's what I got out of it. And my fear is that if something's not done, and I know I'm being grim about something we should be celebrating, but in the end, the reality is still the reality. Like we're still looking at courts that have judges on them who believe that the Constitution is a living document, and there's nothing scarier than that. If a leftist had a if a leftist had a conservative justice on the court and a leftist is in love is all over an issue and the conservative justice believed that it was a living document, because what that means is that my politics can weigh into my decision making. That's the only definition that can be brought into that, right? I mean, is there another way to look at that, right?
No,
That's what it means.
there's not. As I'm listening to you, let me tell you, first of all, I applaud your future, your foresight. When I first heard about this, I think probably like everybody else, I was thrilled about it and hadn't thought that far ahead about it. But you're absolutely right. We do have to do something in terms of the judicial system. And ultimately, that will probably come down to a convention of states. There's nothing that says that term limits have to be on every federal employee. That's still something that has to be discussed once the convention takes place. So we'll see where that goes. You know, here was my take on what happened today, or the things that went through my head. And I just want to throw them out there to you and to the audience because they're also important things to consider. So you take a look at the governor of New York, and I'm looking at the quote, and it says that the governor called the ruling frightening and said it takes away the state's right to protect its citizens. Now, I'm not certain that that was quoted properly because, as far as I know, the state doesn't have a right to protect its citizens. They may have what they deem an obligation, but I don't know of any right that they have, right? So I'm not sure, that was either misquoted, or the governor just, you know, was hot under the collar and misspoke, right?
Yeah, they were
So
hot, but it's really more than likely that the governor believes that.
yeah, it
Like,
is. But the fact of the matter is, they say, yeah, I mean, if you really distill it down, and you and I were talking about it a little bit ago, if you really distill it down, you were saying to me that there's a level of obligation that they have, right? But that level of obligation through the police department and the other agencies that are designed to enforce the law is something that, we pay for. And it's something that's designed to really protect us, but in the sense of when others violate the law. They're not set up like bodyguards to protect us, right? And there is a level of accountability in protecting yourself, because we can't rely upon any entity to ultimately provide our protection. Case in point, if you were a police officer and someone were pointing a gun at me and you didn't have a gun, you wouldn't step in front of the bullet. That's not your
right.
obligation. You're not a Secret Service agent. You're going to probably say, don't shoot, but I'm the one taking the bullet. Now, so I always like to talk about in terms of putting yourself in a scenario. So if you are opposed to gun ownership, put yourself in a scenario that's more likely. As an adult, you might be likely to be in a movie theater, right? And if you're in a movie theater and someone walks into that movie theater and they're mentally ill and they have a weapon, however they got it, would you or would you not prefer to have a weapon of your own? I think if you just, distill it down to something that simple, I don't think anybody that's really being honest with themselves, especially if they had children with them and loved ones, which you normally do at a movie theater, you'd say, yes, I want to have something to defend myself against this lunatic. Now we could go all day about, well, how did the lunatic get the gun and blah blah blah. But the fact of the matter is, bad people are always going to get their hands on something, right? I mean, there's no way you're going to prevent that altogether. All right. So, and let's face it, we live in a society where the guns are not going to go away. They may be able to limit certain things. Who knows? If your fears come into, if they take shape and come to fruition, we may have certain limitations, but they're not going to go away altogether. That would be a distant future that I can't even see. So, considering that the weapons are going to be here, whether they shoot 5 rounds or not, doesn't matter. 5 rounds kill people. 1 round kills a person. So would
Well,
you
I read the
prefer?
full opinion from San Diego when this was probably a year ago now. It was a little over a year ago,
You and
and
I were trying to buy extended magazines at the
yeah,
time.
because that happened. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the reality of the matter is, the judge was 100% spot on, and was like, he was saying, like, how are you going to put a subjective and arbitrary regulation on how many bullets are too many, and how
right,
many bullets, and like, even in the Ninth Circuit, when they overturned this, like, it was more of that living constitution madness. Like, it was more of that, well, we looked and saw that that of all mass shootings, there's all the top mass shootings had clips, or 50% of the mass shootings that killed 20 or more people had high capacity magazines, and it's like, that's not relevant.
no,
That's not, why am I educating you, your honor? That's not relevant.
right,
The fact that there are people who, I mean, clearly, if you're psycho and you're using a 20 round mag as opposed to a 10, clearly, you're gonna be able to pop off, but it's not different than taking another 10 round. Like, I've got 4 10 round clips in my drawer, right? So I get up, my Glock is right next to my bed. I grab it, pop. It's in a fingerprint safe and the holster safe with one in the chamber, and I pull that thing out. But the drawer's right next to it. While I'm pulling it out, I open the drawer, grab 2 or 3 clips or 2 or 3 magazines, and walk out. And then if I need to pop off, I pop off. But the fact of the matter is, like, I still have 30 rounds on me.
Right.
Like this
Right.
minutia that they're playing with are like look, there's absolutely there's absolutely a faction of our society, and it's all in I'm not saying all Democrats, but the same thing as Marxists, right? Like, all Democrats are not Marxists, but all Marxists are Democrats, right? So it's like not all Democrats want to usurp the Second Amendment, but everyone who wants to usurp the Second Amendment is a Democrat. So the fact of the matter is, like, it's the Dems who need to clean their house. Like, they need to get rid of the and really it's I made that analogy. I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, really, it's the Marxists who it's the same analogy. It's almost like the same exact example. Like, the Marxists are the ones who want to disarm the innocent and want to disarm the defenseless. Like that's who wants to do it, because it's it's way too hard, right? Way too hard to implement something like that, or like Marxism, etc. When you've got 350, 400 million, whatever guns, floating around a country. You know what I mean? So, in the hands of citizens who know how to use them. Like when that's the situation, you know, doing a totalitarian takeover is awfully difficult. And even to the people who don't understand cause and don't really get it yet, until they get it, and once they get it, they're excited. But until that point, they go around saying, well, it's all about the Second Amendment. Like, it looks like and that, it's one of the reasons I like educating people on it, because it's showing them, like, look, we're not there yet. We don't need the Second Amendment yet. like there's another part of the Constitution that'll work in our favor as well if we just use it correctly.
Yeah.
And that's
And moving aside from the Marxist point of view, take a city like New York City, right? I mean, with the catch and release laws, the murder rate just over the last year and a half has gone sky high. Now, we did a report on it. I don't have the stats in front of me, but the murder rate's gone sky high. Now, if I can conceal carry and somebody comes walking down the street, I have an opportunity to defend myself and my loved ones. Because what's happening is people are being put on the street that are violent criminals that have access to weapons, but I don't, right? And they're going to
yep.
carry them, and they're going to walk around illegally. I don't want to take the chance because I'm a law-abiding citizen. But now I have someone with malintent, and I have no way to take care of my family. And this is running
Exactly. You know
rampant
what? It's
all
all
through.
gaslighting, bro. It's all
Sure.
gaslighting. We make this case over and over again, and so does everybody else. And it's such common sense that, like, you look. They talk about mass shooting. Like, they're in the wrong country to try and pull this mass shooting crap argument off. This is never going to wash with anybody, because like, instead of like it was in Australia, where the one woman was telling us, this is how they took our guns, is by these friggin' false flag, or they'll
Right.
go and shoot up schools and stuff and scare everybody, and then we give up our guns. And she's like, don't give up your guns. You do that stuff in America, and everybody's like, our reaction isn't, yeah, you get the ones that get on TV, their reaction is, we need to get rid of guns. The Marxist, professors and the Marxist teachers, yes, we need to get rid of guns. But the overwhelming majority of the country are like, dude, we need to arm teachers. like
Well,
that's the American reaction, is like, we need more guns, because that's the reality. We need more guns. Like we need, yeah, sure. Do we need to have mental health exams? Sure we do. But the fact of the matter is, why these things didn't exist for centuries. These things only started happening when the Marxist invasion of our schools, etc., started happening. Like, it's not a coincidence that they're all young kids. They all, where do they get $1,000? A couple $1,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of equipment and ammunition. Like, this is obvious to most Americans, like what's going on. And it's almost disheartening to have to keep explaining the common sense principle that criminals don't follow laws. Like the fact that there are still people out there that you have to explain that to is stunning to me. Because it's like, and only that's the same person. The person who thinks that a gun law is going to stop someone from shooting someone, that's the same person who thinks men can have babies. Like that's the same person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's they're one and the same. Yeah, I said it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what they are. Because these are people that are so deep into mass formation, it's ridiculous. But Jack, you know what? I'm seriously considering right now. I know we got quite a few people on, but it's not a ton. I'm considering just kind of putting a quick end to this and then jumping back on with a new stream and try and include Facebook into the stream. What do you think?
Yeah, I just for the people that are on with us now, I just hate the fact that it could be way redundant. I
Well,
think
it won't be redundant because we still got to get into the conversation. And honestly, they're having. I mean, right now at this moment, that's why I'm saying at this moment, because at this moment we're at the lowest point of people on. So I feel like this might be the moment to make the switch. So if you want to do it, I will just tell everybody, just hang in for a second. We're going to pop back on with another live event. It's going to come up right now. Just go to our homepage, youtube.com/Patriot Think Tank. Facebook.com/Patriot Think Tank. And then Twitch is twitch.tv/Patriot Think Tank. And Rumble is rumble.com/C/Patriot Think Tank. But I'll explain why I want to do this in a sec, Jack. All right.
all right, all right,
All right. We're going to do it.
all right. Bye.
Let me wait. Every time I can't just leave.
And like that,